You might remember that it started way back when we identified that there is a difference between a manager, a technician, and an entrepreneur. And we identified that what often happens is we promote the person who is technically most competent into the role of manager, so we end up with, at best, a super technician, at worst, a micromanager. And that the way out of this quandary, the way out of this difficulty, is to coach, counsel, develop, reassign, to assign tasks, to set direction for your team members. That's how we break out of this. So we conducted a little experiment where we got half the people in the room, half the people out of the room, and we asked them to build a new body. And the second time around was far better than the first time around, because what we'd done is we had set direction. We'd set direction, we analysed performance, and we improved performance. And so we identified that really that's the key steps at a very global level. That is management, that is leadership. To set direction, analyse performance, improve performance, and review performance. So then we looked at how do you set direction? And when we took the set direction apart, we identified that there is 4 questions that we need to answer in a very specific order in order to increase the likelihood that our team members want to listen to what we have to say, listen to what we have to say, are involved in the setting of direction, and they leave feeling motivated, committed, and they leave with an understanding and a knowledge. And those 4 questions are: why, what, how, what else, what if? And so what we did is, if we wanted to set direction, we took each of these questions and we pulled them apart and we looked at a tool, a technique, a tip in order to help us answer each of these questions as best we can. And of course, when it comes to the why question, where we started, we identified that if we use 3 words, it will dramatically increase the likelihood that we have hooked into the audience, that we will earn the right to tell the audience what it is we want to tell them. And those 3 words are reduce, improve, maintain. People will part with vast sums of their time, energy, effort, cash if they can see how doing so is going to reduce their pain, increase their pleasure, and maintain an expectation. Then when it comes to setting direction, the next step is to communicate what the direction is. And we identified a time-honoured technique for doing this, and that is SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-framed. And we identified that a SMART goal is going to increase the likelihood that we achieve something. And so we had practice at writing our own SMART goals. The next component of setting direction was, of course, the how. How are we going to do that is the question that our audience is going to be asking. And we identified that we're now entered the realms of a planning meeting. And when you hold a planning meetings, there are some common planning traps that people will fall into. And in order to avoid these planning traps, we use the process PERT: Program, Evaluation, Review, Technique. Start with the end in mind. Assume that we have already achieved what it is that we hope to achieve, our SMART objective, and work out what would have had to have happened before that in order to achieve that. And in order to do PERT well, we need to keep it global and past tense. So a noun and a past tense verb. Dog, shot is what helps us build a PERT plan. And the last component of setting direction was what else, what if? And we identified that what happens here is, of course, team members will come up with the perennial favourites, reasons as to why this plan won't work. But Rod, you and I have both been here long enough to know that we're not going to get the resources or the support or the approval or whatever it is in order to do this plan. And we identified that if we are to be true leaders, to be able to lead people beyond the current limit of their thinking, we're going to need to be a little bit creative about the way that we do this. And we know that the creativity is about resetting the standard, getting together in groups, allocating time, and toying with content and context. And so whenever someone voices a chestnut, a perennial reason as to why we can't move, then we need to take that reason and ask ourselves, how can we find the time? And we need to reset the standard. There are over 30 ways to create the time to be able to complete this plan, get together in groups, allocate some time and toy with the content and the context in order to come up with over 30 ways. And if we do that, if we answer those 4 questions in that specific order, we have an excellent way of setting direction for our team. Once we've set direction, the next activity becomes to analyse performance, to allow people to start what it is that they're doing and to watch them from a distance. And as we watch these people, we understand that what is easy to do is it's easy to identify labels. It's easy to identify fictitious statements about the person's performance. And what we need to do is we need to be able to objectively analyse performance by talking about behaviour descriptions, by getting to the facts. And we identified how this happens not only with urban myths, but also with corporate rumours. And we identified that the way to bust these urban myths, the way to bust these corporate rumours is to use the behaviour description generator, is to ask ourselves the key question, what have you seen them do or heard them say that has led you to believe that that description may or may not be appropriate? And we know that if we can identify that, we are more likely to be able to analyse performance objectively. And so we practiced this with our team members. We identified some specific terms, some specific team members, some tasks that they do, and we started to objectively analyse their performance. What have we seen them do or heard them say that has led us to believe that they are either competent or committed or not? And as we did this, we identified that there's 2 key aspects to performance. There is a degree of competence and there is a degree of commitment as well. And we then, after analysing performance objectively and working out whether they were performing competently or committedly, we could then work out how to best improve their performance. Sometimes we need to coach, sometimes we need to counsel, sometimes we need to reassign, and sometimes we have the opportunity to develop. So then we took each one of these different options, coaching, counselling, reassigning and developing, and looked at how to do each of those options, how to improve performance. First of all, we looked at coaching. And when we looked at coaching, we identified that there's a difference between knowledge, skill and attitude. And so our coaching sessions cannot just be lectures. They also need to provide the opportunity for people to practice. And we also need to make them an experience so that we can start to shape attitude. And the way to do that, once again, was to use format. We needed to conduct a needs analysis first to identify the difference between someone who performs this task exceptionally well and this person who is performing the task at the moment. And the more detail we can get about that, the more concept, principles and details we can identify about that, the more value we're going to be as a coach. Then what we can do is use format to build, to design and to deliver our coaching session. And while the concept of coaching and formatting stays the same, the details and the techniques when it comes to coaching change a little bit from how we used it when we were setting direction. So when it comes to the why component of coaching, what we need to do here is we need to add in the have you ever. Have you ever found yourself in the first position? Have you ever found yourself in the second position? If so, that is why we are having this coaching conversation today, to reduce, improve or maintain. That becomes our why frame for our coaching session. Then we need to convey what to this person. And in our needs analysis, if we've structured our needs analysis well, we will have the concept, the principles and the details for the what we are trying to coach. Or what we need to do now during the design is we need to chunk and sequence this information. We need to chunk it into 7 plus or minus 2 and we need to sequence it, work out what order to present this information in order to make it in a bite-sized format for our coachee, for the person we're trying to coach. Then there's the how component. We need to demonstrate to our team members, how it looks when it's being done. We also need to provide them with the opportunity to practice, and then we need to provide them with EDI feedback, what it is the person does effectively, what they could do more of, and how to put the icing on the cake, how to improve. And once we've done that with the how component, then we have the opportunity to be a colleague and to do the what else, what if frame, and sit down and to have a chat with them about their experience around their practice. And we know that we are more likely to get a conversation happening if we have pre-framed the practice with a little phrase like, as you do this, what I would like you to notice is. If we pre-frame the practice with a phrase like that, we are more likely to be able to get a conversation happening and therefore to shape experience. So we can use format to design and to deliver our coaching session, and then it becomes a matter of monitoring our coaching session. And we know that when we're monitoring our coaching session, there's 4 places we can look for results. First of all, the emotional response, the wow factor. Were we getting this in our coaching session, or were we getting this in our coaching session? We can also monitor the response in terms of learning. What can people remember from the coaching session? Can they remember the steps? Can they remember some of the details? We also want to identify, are they now behaving differently? And we need to compare that to the behaviour before the coaching session to see if there's a difference. And we also need to look at the results that they are now generating. The error rates, the sales figures, the number of customer compliments, these sorts of things. Are we changing results? That's how we coach. We also need to look at how to deal with people who are not committed, but they are competent. And we identified that counselling is the best way to go here. And that counselling is not about pointing the finger and saying the word you, it is about using the word I. And it is about using I remember, recently I've observed, so what I'm thinking is, so I'm feeling concerned, and what I would like. Do I have the whole picture? And if we use that as a structure and we combine that with using the behaviour description generator to make sure that we don't use the you word or the however or the buts or the all those, we give ourselves the best chance of being able to identify what is truly causing the low commitment. We also know that some people may respond emotionally, not logically, to our feedback, to our fireside chat, to our counselling. And we need now to recognise that that's a human response. And the best way of dealing with that is to listen. And then ask a few questions, then thank them, create a bit of time for us to think, and then get back to them. And if we can combine those models together for our coaching session, we give ourselves the best chance possible of being able to improve commitment. And that will be the case most of the time. And sometimes there are some people who don't get it first time around, in which case we need to have the second fireside chat, where we slightly change the language from concerned to upset or annoyed, where we change the language from I'm thinking to myself that this is not the John I'm used to working with, we change it to I'm thinking that this is the second time we've had to have this chat. We can up the ante. 9 times out of 10, people's performance will improve, and if they don't, we then go to an oral warning, where we discard the OTFD model and we basically talk about this is the behaviour I'm getting, this is the behaviour I need. There's a gap, there's 2 ways I can fill this gap. One is with you, one is without you. I don't want to head down path B, and I don't think you do either. But rest assured, if we don't improve performance this time, we will be heading down path B. Do you understand what that means? So, what do we need to do to improve performance? That is an oral warning. And we need to get HR, and perhaps we need to get our managers involved as well to make sure, if we're not feeling entirely comfortable with how to approach this, to make sure we've got support. Most of the time, performance turns around at that point, and there will be some people whose performance continues to be poor, in which case we need the support of our manager and our human resources department to make sure that we dot the I's and cross the T's as we head down the path of documenting our counselling and perhaps even a termination interview as well. And that's how we deal with the low commitment. And then, of course, we have the wonderful opportunity to provide something, to give something back to our best performers, to those who are competent and committed. And this, of course, is the opportunity to develop, to have a development conversation with our team members, to be able to take them beyond the current limit of what it is that they're doing and give them something back. And we identified the keys to doing this well is, first of all, is to pre-frame the development conversation, is to the day before we have this conversation, is to ask them to think about where they would like to be in 2 to 5 years' time, what they'd like to do more of, less of, what they love doing, what they hate doing, all these sorts of things, and what does that mean for them in 2 to 5 years' time. So that when they get to that meeting the next day, when we ask the question, so did you have the chance to think about what we discussed yesterday, they are more likely to be able to come up with something, more likely to be able to discuss where they see themselves in 2 to 5 years' time. And then our job becomes asking questions for width and asking questions for depth in order to be able to find out as much as we can about where this person sees themselves heading. As we ask these questions, we need to keep in mind that we need to bust that syllogism between development equals promotion to a specific position. We are not offering a specific position. We are not offering a promotion. We are offering an opportunity to develop certain competencies, certain knowledge, certain experiences, and a personal style that may be appropriate for the sort of role that they would most like to do. We can help them with the competencies, the experiences, the knowledge, and the personal style. We cannot promise them a promotion. So as we build these lists, as we're listening to them and we're building these lists about competencies, job knowledge, experiences, and personal style, we start to notice the similarities and the differences. The similarities between where they're currently at and what they would like, and the differences between where they're currently at and what they would like. And we can use this in our conversation to say something like, well, what I think you've already got going for you is this knowledge, that competency, this part of the personal style. So perhaps the opportunity to develop lies in giving you this experience, developing that aspect of your personal style and providing this level of competence. And this is where we can now build a development plan that has an objective, a series of action steps, and that you have committed to doing the first 2 or 3 steps so that you can prove to your team member that you're serious about this. And that's how we improve performance, through coaching, counselling, reassigning, and developing. And that was the leadership program as we covered it. I hope this review has been helpful for you to trigger those things that you would most like to remember, so to help you improve your own performance. It's because remember that just knowing this stuff ain't enough. It's about you doing it as well.